Week 2 of the NFL season is here. It's Panthers, it's Chargers, and we'll break it all down right here on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers.
You are Locked On NFL crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host of Locked On Panthers, Julian Council. He is your host of Locked On Chargers, David Drogemeyer, and we are here on yet another Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, breaking down the Week 2 matchup of the Carolina Panthers versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Be sure to subscribe or follow our shows for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And every crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Week 1 was very different for the debuts of Dave Canales in Carolina and Jim Harbaugh in LA. David, I don't know how you're feeling, but it was a rough one for me and all the folks here in the Carolinas. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm just so happy that we are in the middle of the best sports month of the entire year, where we have football and baseball playoffs and, man, college football. It is fantastic. But as far as how we're feeling great around here. I mean, picking up a big win over a division opponent, which to me, those wins count like 2 because that division record is so very important. So Charger fans getting the Jim Harbaugh era kicked off in winning style.
Yeah, they should be excited. And you bring up a good point. Winning those division matchups are like winning 2 games, and the Panthers are unfortunately kind of down 2 games after losing that first game to New Orleans in horrible, embarrassing fashion, 47-10, while the Chargers won kind of a rock fight there on that Sunday afternoon against the Las Vegas Raiders. Looking at the offense, what's the biggest storyline heading into week 2? I know that running game really looked good in the second half. Is the expectation again that J.K. Dobbins is going to have another 130-plus rushing attack in the second half?
Well, let's hope so. Let's also hope that the Chargers offense gets off to a much faster start than they did in the week 1 matchup against the Raiders. They really only had 83 yards and 2 first downs offensively in the first half. And also the running game did not get going until the second half either. Only 10 carries, 26 yards. They were, really trying to figure things out. Didn't feel like they were trying to establish that rhythm. They had to make some adjustments up front in the blocking schemes, really just get their timing right. I think at halftime, they really made the necessary adjustments to be able to kick things off. They started to break off bigger runs. They started to complete some passes and string some first downs together. That took some time, but yeah, I think Gus Edwards did okay, but J.K. Dobbins was the big story in the running game for the Chargers. 10 carries, 135 yards, and that touchdown coming back from a serious injury, the Achilles injury. I think for J.K. Dobbins, he's proven when he's on the football field and he's healthy, like he is very, very dangerous. So I do feel like the Chargers said they're going to ride the hot hand. I expect that J.K. Dobbins will get fed early and fed often.
Yeah, looking from the outside, that's an interesting running back group. Gus Edwards, the Gus Bus, was excellent in Baltimore in the role that he played. Then J.K. Dobbins has dealt with injuries. Again, I don't think you look at either one of those backs and think that they're top 10 backs in the league. But together, that's going to be a pretty solid pairing. You already saw it week 1, especially in the second half. I'm curious, how much do you think Justin Herbert missing time in training camp in the preseason impacted the offense on Sunday?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit to do with it. I think he was a little bit rusty by his like very prolific, lofty standards. I think he missed a couple of throws, not many, but also like this is a Chargers offense that now doesn't need Justin Herbert to play Superman. That doesn't need to have put the entire offense on his back. And also, I just felt like the Chargers felt like they were going to be able to run the ball against the Raiders. Like they were going to stay committed. They were going to continue to hammer. And eventually they softened up the Raiders defense and really hit them big and gashed them in the running game, which is a nice like compromise and a nice change for Justin Herbert because in the past, the Chargers had no running game to speak of at all. I mean, the last 3 years, it's really been easy to play defense against the Chargers because they can just keep two safeties deep and put a roof over the coverage and really force the Chargers to try to be pinpoint accurate and run the football, which they know that they could not. But now, at least if week 1 is any indication, they should be able to run the football more efficiently, which will then open things up for Justin Herbert. I think he did knock some rust off, and I think he just needs to really continue to get that chemistry with some very young wide receivers.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I think when you think about Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, you know you're going to be able to run the football. He did it when he was in Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, then went to the NFL and was with his brother John, with the Ravens for all that time. They could run the ball, but there was always questions about the passing game. I think the questions really in Baltimore more about Lamar Jackson and some of the inaccuracies that he has in the pass game. I don't think that's really a concern at all when you look at Justin Herbert, his physical ability and just his overall accuracy. And I've been a huge Herbert fan since his time at Oregon. So I loved how he's come out and had success with the Chargers. I have not loved that they have not necessarily had a defense to complement him and a run game not to complement him. And now I'm looking at the receivers like Keenan Allen. He is now a Chicago Bear. You look at Mike Williams. He is now a New York Jet whenever he's going to play at some point this season. Austin Eckler is a Washington Commander. Still weird saying Commanders. Like, who do they have now to be weapons in that pass game? And I'm coming from Carolina, I know we don't have weapons here. But what is Justin Herbert working with nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I actually disagree with you a little bit. I like the physical nature that the Panthers have at wide receiver. I think they have a couple of guys that can go up and get the football if Bryce Young's given time and doesn't throw off his back foot. I mean, that's definitely something that he needs to stop doing. But for the Chargers at wide receiver, I think the two guys that you're looking at, outside of Josh Palmer, who's probably the number 1 wide receiver, he's kind of I can do a little bit of everything type of guy. Lad McConkey is a guy that you're going to have to pay attention to. I mean, he is very, very quick, runs NFL-ready routes, has very good hands, is very physical. Like, for a smaller guy, for a 185-pound wide receiver, like, he is not afraid to mix it up. He will get in on the running game. He will try to finish blocks. And also, he had a nice touchdown in his debut in the NFL where he made 2 defenders miss and just kind of waltzed right into the end zone. So he's going to get a ton of carries, or excuse me, a ton of targets in this offense. Also, I feel like the Chargers coaching staff has now figured out a better way to utilize Quentin Johnston, which is getting him the ball in space and letting him do what he does best, which is run after catch. He really does turn into a running back when he gets the ball in his hands. The previous coaching staff did not know how to use Quentin Johnston properly, and I think already through 1 game, we feel a lot more comfortable with how he is being utilized. So those 2 guys, and also don't forget about your old friend, Hayden Hurst, the tight end.
Yes.
Hayden Hurst had a nice catch in that game, a really big explosive reception in there. I think as the weeks go by, he is going to get more on the same page with Justin Herbert.
Yeah, Hayden had the concussion last year in Carolina that cost him the final 8 games of the season. Prior to then, I mean, the offense was a complete disaster with the offensive line injuries, Bryce Young being a rookie, the other receivers not getting open, and on and on and on. Just the misery that this Panthers offense was last year. Seems to be after 1 week. So good to see that he's back healthy. I was concerned about that and whether he should keep playing. But, of course, if he's able to, hopefully it works out for him there in LA. And Quentin Johnston, loved him when he was at TCU. Thinking about it, Brock Bowers and Quentin both played against each other in that national championship game. If you want to call it, was a national championship game. It didn't feel like one as Georgia rolled through them. But good to hear that he's at least getting an opportunity now with Jim Harbaugh and that coaching staff, and not surprised that Harbaugh, not Brandon Staley, is being able to figure out how to use a talent like Quentin Johnston. But that is the Los Angeles Chargers. I always want to say San Diego, so good on me for not saying San Diego. Los Angeles Chargers side of things offensively, and I guess I forgot about the defense. What's the defense looking like so far this season?
The defense has been fantastic. I mean, going through the Raiders, I think they handled them very, very well. I think Jesse Minter really cooked up a really good game plan and really shut down the Raiders wide receivers. I think Devontae Adams had 59 yards receiving on 5 catches, and they really did a great job of stunting the running game as well. I think they only allowed 73 yards rushing that entire game. So the pass rush is lethal. I mean, they have one of the best pass rushes in the entire NFL with Khalil Mack, a healthy Joey Bosa, And when he's healthy, he's an absolute monster. So having those guys paired with Bud Dupree and Tuli Tuipulotu, they have a nasty pass rush that the Carolina Panthers absolutely have to account for.
Yeah, could be a problem for Ike Ekwonu and Taylor Moton, who did not have the best grades according to Pro Football Focus on Sunday in that loss against the Saints. I was looking over at EPA, expected points added. Chargers have the number 4 overall defense after, of course, only 1 week, and the number 1 run defense, something Carolina's going to have to face as they want to run the ball, something they did not necessarily do in that week 1 loss against the Saints. Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers, David Drogemeyer, the host of one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers. We're breaking down the Panthers-Chargers week 2 matchup here in Uptown Charlotte. Can take a quick pause and come back, and I guess we'll talk about these Carolina Panthers and what you can expect from them on Sunday here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. My ultimate spread on game day is pretty simple. Love to get me a big old pizza, some wings, have some chips, and after the Panthers game's over, maybe crack open a beer because, you know, your boy needs it watching this team go out there and embarrass itself almost every single week. But I digress. Use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15+ on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 and over to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. And also, we have Hims. Men, real talk. The only thing worse than losing your hair is waiting forever for it to grow back. That's why you need Hims, and you can start seeing your hair grow back in as little as 3 to 6 months. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. They offer personalized, chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatment options so you can find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online. Just answer a few questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door. Hims has hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers. So if you feel like you're losing a part of yourself with your hair loss, get Hims and get your confidence back. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/LockedOnNFL. That's HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL for your personalized hair loss treatment options. HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers. Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. David Drogemeyer, one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers. It is a Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, sponsored by our friends over at Prize Picks. We talked about the Chargers of it all. Now let's take a look at the Panthers as, David, that was one of the most embarrassing performances I've ever seen from the Carolina Panthers. And since David Tepper bought the team, I have seen a lot of embarrassing performances. I was not expecting that. Like last week, I asked fans, and I just want to know how people are feeling about things heading into the season. And a lot of times, you know, fan bases aren't very realistic. And this one has had its moments. I'm sure the one that you cover has also had its moments. And I was just like, okay, guys, we're coming out 2-15 here. They made a lot of changes. Like, how do you feel? And most people were telling me 6 wins would be cool. And I've been saying to them, what if this team could triple its win total, which sounds a lot better than 6-11. So that's kind of where I was at heading into the season. And I like that most people were right around 6 or 7 wins. I did see some people thinking the ceiling was like 11, which I thought was ludicrous and looks even worse now. But overall, what people just wanted to see was this team be competent. And they were not competent on Sunday. Like that game was gone and done with after the first quarter. And I mean, my God, man.
Yeah, that was tough. That was tough to watch. And I went back and watched that game again. And you know, you talked about how on offense they want to run the football, right? But it's really hard to run the football when you're down 20-0. I mean, that's just it gets you out of your game plan and really forces Bryce Young to have to throw the football a lot more. Now, like I said, I liked, some of the receiving options that the Carolina Panthers have, and Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette, Deontay Johnson. Those are all like high quality receivers. Not to mention the veteran Adam Thielen as well. What's the outlook of this offense? Like, what do you want to see? Like, what improvements do they have to show going forward from week 1 to week 2?
Well, I mean, where do I start? It's like they got to improve everywhere. And the thing too, like Canales is asked about this after the game, and even on Monday after reviewing film, because coaches a lot of times are like, well, I got to see the film first before I can answer your question, which is ridiculous. You just sat there and watched it. I understand from a certain extent that yes, you need to see certain things back, but come on, man. He felt like they ran the ball as much as they wanted to. I think the game dictated them not being able to run as much, but I did not buy that at all. They had a situation where it was 1st and goal, I believe, from the 5. At no point did they ever call, or he ever call, a design run. Eventually, Bryce Young ran it in on 4th down when trying to evade a sack, which is great. They got the touchdown, but he didn't try to run the football at all. And if you're a team, and he's talked about being stubborn about running the football, if you want to establish the run, why are you having Bryce Young throw the ball over the middle on the opening play of the game? That's just my question. So I think they can change things up by actually being dedicated to the run. Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, mainly Chuba Hubbard, needs to touch the ball more than 5 times like he did in that game on Sunday if they're going to have success, especially against a run defense that through 1 week is the top run defense in the NFL, according to EPA. I look at the offensive line. I felt like overall the 3 guys in the interior was solid. I thought the Taylor Moton at right tackle was solid. Ike Ekwonu, he did give up 4 pressures in that game, and he gave up quarterback hit. He's got to be better, especially this game coming up where you got Khalil Mack, you got Joey Bosa. Like, that can be a concern. And he was really bad last year, having to play with different guys every week at left guard. So they got to be a little bit better at tackle. And I mean, receiving wise, I felt like they were fine. Like, Thielen was open. Legette actually, like, his 1.8 yards of separation was one of the worst totals in the NFL last week, but yet he still had 4 receptions for 35 yards. So that was actually encouraging for a guy who's not known to be a great separator, that he was able to not get great separation, but still make plays. Mingo, I'm done with him. The dude fumbled twice last week. One of them was a great play that Canales called up, and he fumbles that ball away. He fumbled a second time that ended up he was out of bounds. You can't trust him with the football. They don't have a lot of options anyways, that receiver outside of the top 2, that being Johnson and Thielen. And Dave Canales was asked about this on Wednesday, how they're going to find more ways to do it. He said, we're working on it. Of course, doesn't want to give away their game plan to the Chargers. Sure. But yeah, but mainly they need a quarterback to look confident and to not be jittery in the pocket and be accurate. I sat there and I went to training camp for half the time back in August and at the end of July. And the Bryce Young I saw on Sunday was not the Bryce Young that I saw over on the practice field. I understand that it's completely different on Cedar Street where the Panthers practice than when they get on Mint Street or wherever else in the NFL and play. But still, like, that guy looked renewed. He looked rejuvenated. He looked like someone who was going to come out and at least be prepared to have success. I didn't see that at all on Sunday. And if he does not get it figured out, then, well, the Panthers have bigger problems than just whether they're going to win this game in week 2.
Yeah. Switching things over to the defensive side for the Panthers. Obviously, again, I mean, both sides of the ball, like, that's not the type of performance that you want to put out there on tape. And unfortunately, they lost, their probably best defensive player for the season, and Derrick Brown, which is awful. What's the defense look like? What are the prospects? Who are the players that we need to pay attention to? What are the redeeming qualities that you want to see, or that you see from that Panthers defense?
What are the redeeming qualities of the Panthers defense that gave up 9 straight scoring drives and 180 yards on the ground? Their number 2 corner, Mike Jackson, who they traded for, he looked actually pretty good. That's been a question throughout the offseason, who was going to play opposite of J.C. Horn. Another redeeming quality is that J.C. Horn didn't get injured. He has missed most of the games he's been active or available for. At least he's missed most of the games in his career so far here in Carolina. So he made it through week 1 last year. He didn't make it through week 1. So that right there are positives for this Panthers defense. Outside of that, I was concerned about this unit coming into the year. And after what I saw on Sunday, I'm even more concerned now that Derrick Brown is out for the season. Like, Derrick Brown was out there and they gave 180 yards on the ground. I felt like by bringing in Jadeveon Clowney, who's an upgrade on the edge as far as setting the edge and against the run. Like, Brian Burns is a better player, but he's not good against the run. And you're a nerd if you care about that kind of stuff when you look at Brian Burns. But Clowney, it matters. Ejiro Evero, the DC, cares about that kind of stuff, and he's an upgrade in that department. They ran away from him all last week because they knew that, oh, they got Akuliota, DJ Johnson on the other side. We can run through those guys, and that's what they did last week, and they ran through the entirety of the defensive line. A'Shawn Robinson actually played fairly well. I think he was the highest-graded defender for the Panthers, according to PFF, and he's going to have to take on a bigger role now that Brown is gone. Shai Tuttle was a complete embarrassment yet again. That's been an awful signing for this team dating back to last year, and the former general manager and cap guys, Samir Suleiman and Scott Bitter, are to blame for that, as they set up the contract to where they couldn't get out of it after last season, where he did not help them. So I don't have a lot of faith in this run defense based off of last year and what I've seen so far through 1 week of this season. The edge rush is non-existent. Clowney was brought in to be one of those edge rushers, but if you watch his career, he's never really been that kind of ace pass rusher in the NFL. Had a good year last year in Baltimore, but who didn't have a good year last year in Baltimore? And then DJ Wonnum, who they also signed, hasn't been available, and there's no clue when he's going to be available, as he's currently on the physically unable to perform list. So I got a lot of concerns about this Panthers defense moving forward without Brown and moving into this game against the Chargers offense that wasn't great last week, but they can run the ball. You can run the ball. You can dictate the line of scrimmage, things that Jim Harbaugh's known to do from his time in San Francisco, his time at Stanford, and his time most recently at Michigan. Yeah, it's gonna be tough sledding for the Panthers potentially on defense on Sunday. So we looked at the Panther side of things on offense, on defense. We looked at the Charger side of things on offense and on defense. Now let's look at what these teams must do in order to win, as the Chargers, looking at it right now, are nearly a touchdown favorite on the road. So Vegas, our friends in the desert, not liking Carolina after 1 week, but they are liking what they're seeing out of Jim Harbaugh and his squad after 1 week. We'll break it all down here on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers here in just a moment on the show. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And right now, I know folks have DirecTV. They're not being able to watch sports right now, or Sunday Ticket, because it's over on YouTube TV. And I've had YouTube TV for a long time now, and I love it. And all you got to do is bet $5. Bet $5 on the Chargers to win or the Panthers to win, and you get 3-week free trial. Maybe you win some money, maybe you lose some money. Bet it on college, Major League Baseball. It's that simple, y'all. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers. I'm Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. He is David Drogemeyer, the host of Locked On Chargers. It is a crossover Thursday presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Panthers hosting the Chargers at 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. early in the morning there on the West Coast. And looking over at our friends at FanDuel, which we just told you about, 6.5-point favorites. The Chargers are coming on the road. Is that a surprising line to you at all, David, after what we've seen so far?
No, not really. I mean, no disrespect to the Panthers, but that was a pretty underwhelming performance to start the season for them. And I think, there's really, I think, a lack of identity for that football team. I don't think they know who they are or what they want to do out there quite yet. And I think they're still trying to figure out who they are. And I think with Jim Harbaugh, he brings an identity. It's ready-made. It's physical. It's physicality. It's, I'm going to drag you into the deep water. I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to pound the rock. We're going to play physical football for 60 minutes. And, we're going to see who's, standing at the end of the game. So I just think that, with given that information, I feel like this is a pretty, understandable line here.
Yeah, and identity is a big thing. The Panthers for years now have not known what their identity at all is. They didn't know it under Matt Rule. They didn't know it last year under Frank Reich. They did know it for a period of time when Steve Wilkes was the interim head coach, but David Tepper was not interested in Steve Wilkes being the interim head coach or the head coach, period.
No
when
idea
they had an
why.
identity. Yeah, and that's the thing that a lot of fans, I saw it brought up on social media on Sunday. The Panthers had an identity. They had an attitude. They brought physicality. And Tepper said, no, I need to have an offensive coach because apparently that's the only way to have success in the NFL, which is patently false. But I digress. Looking at things on Sunday, what are 3 things the Chargers have to do to beat the Panthers other than, of course, just show up based off how the Panthers played last week?
Oh, God. So 3 things that the Chargers need to do. First, find rhythm in the passing game. Second is don't overlook the Panthers. And the third is continue being a fourth quarter team. So finding rhythm in the passing game. Justin Herbert, not a crazy game by his standards, 17 to 26, 144 yards and a touchdown. Took quite a while to get the passing game going, and really, I'd say midway towards the third quarter, that's when they started to kind of click a little bit. Offensive line has to do a better job of handling the stunts and the blitzes. I think the tackles played well, but the interior of the offensive line definitely struggled a little bit throughout that football game. Don't overlook the Panthers. Just because they had a bad first game does not mean that they're not going to come in here motivated. They guarantee they want to wash the stink of that game off of them, and they want to come in here and try to win a football game. And this feels like a trap game for the Chargers, but they can't have that mentality. You can't overlook any opponent in the National Football League, no matter who it is. You got to show up ready to play and be prepared, and then continue being a fourth quarter team. For the Chargers, it's all been this whole offseason about the fourth quarter finishing periods. It's after practice is done, Jim Harbaugh is, and Ben Herbert, the strength and conditioning coach, extra work after practice, getting that extra work in, trying to be as in top physical condition as they possibly can. So when it gets to the end of the game and they need to be at their best, they have the stamina and then endurance to be able to do that. So that's, what the Chargers have to do if they want to win this football game on Sunday.
Man, I just hearing about a trap game in the NFL in week 2 like that. That's some college stuff, man. It's like we're talking about the Texas Longhorns walking into Manhattan, Kansas at 11 a.m. Central Time for a game on Fox. That's what the Panthers are as far as the respectability or lack thereof so far in the NFL. And until they're able to establish an identity, that's kind of going to be how people feel outside of this market. And I think even within the market, there's people who feel that way as well. So I don't necessarily disagree with you on any of the keys that you put out there for the Chargers. As far as the Panthers are concerned, they got to take pressure off of Bryce Young. We talked about it earlier. Makes no sense to me how a coach and Dave Canales is going to sit here all off season long and talk about how he wants to be stubborn about running the football. While they kept Miles Sanders when it would have made sense potentially get rid of him. Maybe not cap-wise, but as far as production-wise, what they got out of him last year looked like a guy that you could have easily parted ways with if, of course, the cap wasn't existent. Chuba Hubbard was expected to play a big role. They drafted Jonathan Brooks, who's currently on a non-football injury list, can be out for the next at least 3 weeks. I'm just shocked that they did not come out there and try to run the ball on the Saints and that they asked Bryce to carry them. He throws a pick immediately, and then his confidence is gone. And by the time you wake up, if they ever woke up, you're down 17-0. You're getting embarrassed. They got to take pressure off of Bryce. They have to run the ball, especially between the tackles. They brought in Robert Hunt at right guard, Damian Lewis at left guard, and shifted Austin Corbett there at center for a reason, because they want to run the ball, and they need to do that with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. I'm someone who thinks that you got to run running backs into the ground and then move on and get another one. You use them, you abuse them, and then you lose them. This is the last year for Hubbard. This should be the last year for Miles Sanders. Run those guys, man. I don't see what they're waiting for there. Take pressure off of Bryce Young in that manner. Then on the defensive side of the ball, Derrick Brown's gone. You can't sit here and cry about it. It sucks you're losing your leader, your best player. But guys got to show some pride on that line of scrimmage. They got to be able to stop the run. The Chargers ran the ball extremely well there in the second half of that Raiders game. J.K. Dobbins, good player. Gus Edwards, good player as well. But it ain't like you're facing off against Alvin Kamara for the second week in a row. This is not Christian McCaffrey, who, God, the Panthers, man, they had Christian McCaffrey once upon a time. This is not one of the top backs, not one of the top. Maybe an underrated backfield that they have there in L.A., but you got to be able to show some toughness, be able to stop the run, and be able to control the line of scrimmage. You want to have any chance at winning this game at all on Sunday. And I kind of said it there, show some pride. There's a lot of guys who were here last year when they went 2-15. There's a lot of guys that were here the year prior when they turned things around after a 1-5 start and were right there week 16 with an opportunity to beat Tampa Bay and potentially go to the playoffs by winning the division. A lot of guys are here when they won 5 games back-to-back seasons. There's a lot of dudes that have just not won games in Carolina. And at some point in time, you got to just say you're sick of it and actually do something about it and show some pride. Last week, what I saw was was absolutely the most embarrassing performance in week 1 of in this franchise's history. I just don't understand guys like Shaq Thompson getting a tackle late and celebrating. you're getting your ass kicked, man. And you're supposed to be a captain on this team, one of the leaders. You gotta have a situational awareness, but also show some dang pride, man. That's what I want to see from the Panthers team on Sunday if they're going to have any chance at winning this game at all. I don't necessarily have a pick. Do you have a pick at all, David, or are you all set on where the Chargers potentially need to do on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the pick, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to put a score out there, but I do feel like the Chargers are probably going to win this football game. I just feel like what they're bringing to the table here, offensively and defensively especially, I think they're a very scary football team, a lot scarier than a lot of people gave them credit for going into this season, because they have some connectivity from the back end with Derwin James and Alohi Gilman to the front end with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, and even in the middle with Denzel Perriman, Deion Henley. They have some players at every level of this defense, and on offensively, they're going to run the rock. They are going to bleed the clock in this football game. They're going to try to stay ahead of the sticks, probably going to pop play action when they can, but I'm not going to put a score out there, but I do feel like the Chargers are going to win this one.
Yeah, and I think everything's leaning towards the Chargers just based off of 1 week, but it is just 1 week, week to week league here in the NFL, and it's certainly not a run possibility. The Panthers decide to figure things out, come out and play a much better game on Sunday, which is part of the reason why you said don't overlook this Panthers team after what happened last week. Don't really have a pick on the game, but I do think I'm expecting that it'll be a little bit closer than it was last week, a lot closer than it was last week, and the Panthers lost to the Saints. But that's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Chargers. I'm your host of Locked On Panthers, Julian Council. He's one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers, David Drogemeyer. A Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Subscribe or follow both our shows for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And check us out again on Friday as we'll be breaking down more of this week 2 matchup here in the beautiful city of Charlotte between the Panthers and the Chargers. Until then, take care, and we will talk to y'all